pa rin, Tatak City High.
Hello, my fellow lovers of science. Welcome to an episode of discovering how our body is wonderfully created to carry out incredible tasks and activities. This is Teacher Karil, and join me in a fun learning experience about the respiratory and circulatory systems. Here are our objectives. At the end of this video lesson, you should be able to identify the key parts of the respiratory and circulatory systems. Describe the functions of the respiratory and circulatory systems. Describe how the movement of the diaphragm helps the air go in and out of the lungs. Describe how the heart functions and the different types of circulation. And explain the process of blood flow through the human heart. Let us now begin learning about the respiratory system. To spice it up, I have a little trivia for you. Did you know that you can actually survive for several days without water? You can survive for a month without food, but you can't survive for more than 5 minutes without oxygen. Let us now discuss the functions played by the respiratory systems in our body. First, our respiratory organs exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide between the air and the cells. Second, it filters particles from the incoming air. Third, it helps control the temperature and water content of air. Fourth, it aids in producing the sounds used in speech. Lastly, it plays important roles in the sense of smell and the regulation of the pH. For all those incredible functions of the respiratory organs in our body, that deserves a big hand. Right now, you will learn to identify the key parts and describe the functions of the respiratory system. Starting with the nose. It is the gateway of the respiratory system. Oxygen enters the body via the nose. The nasal cavity is lined with tiny hairs called cilia and mucous membranes that secrete a sticky fluid that moisten and warm the air that is breathed and trap dirt and other particles. Next is the trachea. It is commonly called the windpipe. It functions as the passageway for air going in and out of the lungs. The trachea then splits into two small tubes called bronchi. Singular form, bronchus. It is the main passageway into the lungs. Each bronchus then divides, and the smallest subdivisions, which lack cartilage tissue, are the bronchioles. At the distal end of the bronchioles are the air sacs. Air sacs look like a bunch of grapes. Each air sac is composed of several microscopic outpocketing called alveoli, where gas exchange happens. Then, the main organ of the respiratory system is the lungs. Lungs are cone-shaped organs of respiration in humans that are full of millions of alveoli. Humans have 2 lungs that completely fill the spaces of the chest cavity and are surrounded by the rib cage. And finally, the diaphragm. It is a large muscle that lies flat at the bottom of the chest cavity. It aids in breathing by moving up and down. Interesting, right? Let us proceed to the breathing process. Breathing involves two processes. These are inhalation and exhalation. What happens during inhalation? When you breathe in or inhale, the diaphragm muscle contracts. Inhaling moves the diaphragm down and expands the chest cavity. Simultaneously, the ribs move up and increase the size of the chest cavity. Meanwhile, during exhalation, or when you breathe out, the diaphragm muscle relaxes. The diaphragm moves up and ribs return to their original place. The chest cavity returns to its original size. Our respiratory system is pretty amazing, isn't it? Well, let us be more amazed by the next organ system in line, the circulatory system. To learn more about this, let us first know the important functions that it plays in our body. The circulatory system is like a network of highways, streets, and alleys connecting the cells together into a community. It is a life support system that nourishes your cells from the food you eat and oxygen from the air you breathe. It transports nutrients, oxygen, hormones, and other materials to and from the cells of the body. And it also functions in fighting diseases, stabilize body temperature and pH to maintain homeostasis. Right now, let us learn the three different types of circulation. These are: first, we have pulmonary circulation; second, coronary circulation; third, systemic circulation. Let us discuss the movement of blood in each type. Pulmonary circulation is the movement of blood from the heart to the lungs and back to the heart. Coronary circulation, from the word itself, is the movement of blood through the tissues of the heart. Meanwhile, systemic circulation is the movement of blood from the heart to the rest of the body, excluding the lungs. Let us now proceed to the different types of blood vessels. Blood vessels are transport mechanisms that carry blood throughout the body. The circulatory system has three types of blood vessels, namely arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to the cells, tissues, and organs of the body. On the other hand, veins carry deoxygenated blood from the different parts of the body towards the heart. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels in the body, connecting the smallest arteries to the smallest veins. It is the actual site where gases and nutrients are exchanged. Let us now discuss in detail the main part of the circulatory system, which is the human heart. The heart is a muscular organ that pumps blood to the different parts of the body. It is located at the middle of the chest cavity, with its tip or apex slightly tilted toward the left. Its base lies just below the second ribs. The heart is just as big as one's own clenched fist. A sac, known as pericardium, encloses it. The human heart is also a four-chambered heart. Now, let us learn further these four chambers. These are the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. The right chambers carry deoxygenated blood or oxygen-poor blood as indicated by the color blue, while the left chambers carry oxygenated blood or oxygen-rich blood as indicated by the color red. The atria, plural form, are the receiving chambers of the heart. The right atrium receives oxygen-poor blood from the vena cava, a large vein, while the left atrium receives blood from the pulmonary veins. Meanwhile, the two ventricles are the pumping chambers that force blood out of the heart. The right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs for oxygenation, while the left ventricle pumps oxygen-rich blood to all parts of the body. To complete all the parts of the heart, let us discuss the valves. Valves are flaps of muscles that prevent blood from backflowing. These are one-way doors. There are two sets of valves. First, the atrioventricular valves, and the second one, the pulmonary valves. These valves work to ensure that blood will move only in one direction. The atrioventricular valves, also known as cuspid valves, are located between the atria and ventricles. The right atrioventricular valve is a tricuspid valve, while the left atrioventricular valve is a bicuspid or mitral valve. The second set of valves are semilunar valves. The valve between the right ventricle and pulmonary artery is the pulmonary semilunar valve. The valve between the left ventricle and the aorta is the aortic semilunar valve. These are located at the bases of the large vessels leaving the ventricles. Let us trace where these valves are located in the heart. We have the tricuspid valve, bicuspid or mitral valve, pulmonary valve, and aortic valve. Earlier, we have discussed the different types of blood vessels in the circulatory system. Now, we will find out about the blood vessels connected to the heart. First, we have the vena cava. It is divided into two. These are the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. The vena cava is the largest vein that is connected to the heart. This vein conveys oxygen-poor blood coming from all parts of the body back to the right atrium. Second is the aorta. The aorta is the largest artery. It conveys oxygen-rich blood pumped by the left ventricle to all parts of the body. Lastly, we have the pulmonary arteries and the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary arteries convey blood pumped by the right ventricle to the lungs for oxygenation. It branches into two, connecting to each of the lungs. The pulmonary veins convey oxygen-rich blood back to the left atrium of the heart. Let us locate where the pulmonary arteries are located. We have the right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. We also have the right pulmonary veins and the left pulmonary veins. To complete our learning of the circulatory system, I have inserted a clip from Neural Academy that clearly summarizes the process of blood flow in the heart. Here it goes.
Now, let's follow the path of the blood through the heart. The superior vena cava receives blood from the head, neck, upper limbs, and chest. Meanwhile, the inferior vena cava receives blood from the trunk, viscera, and lower limbs. Both the superior and inferior vena cava end up in the right atrium, one of the 4 chambers of the heart. The heart not only has 4 chambers, it also has 4 valves. The purpose of the valves is to keep blood moving in the right direction and not flow backwards. Blood exits the right atrium through the tricuspid valve, so called because it has 3 flaps, and enters the right ventricle. The blood exits the right ventricle through the pulmonary valve and enters the pulmonary artery. Again, it is an artery because blood is flowing away from the heart, but it is blue because it lacks oxygen. The pulmonary artery then splits into the left and right pulmonary arteries, which go to each respective lung. In the lungs, gas exchange occurs. The blood discards carbon dioxide and picks up oxygen. Now, blood comes back from the lungs through the pulmonary veins, entering the left atrium. Next, the blood is pumped into the left ventricle through the mitral or bicuspid valve. Finally, the oxygenated blood leaves the left ventricle through the aortic semilunar valve, entering the aortic arch. The aorta, which is the largest of all the arteries, distributes the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body.
Simply, that's the process of blood flow through the heart. There you go, my fellow lovers of science. That's our awesome respiratory and circulatory systems. I hope you enjoyed this fun learning experience with me, Teacher Karil. Thank you, and see you in our next episode. Bye!